All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Empiricism under siege. How emotional women and beta males destroyed the pursuit of truth. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. The solipsism of the soy candle sovereign. Why the hysterical tears of a privileged parasite will never outweigh the logos, blood, and sweat that built the world she blames for her own emptiness. I want you to imagine something for me. Imagine a man, a coal miner in West Virginia, say, or a lineman repairing transformers in a February blizzard in Saskatchewan. This man works 14 hours in conditions that would make a gender studies professor faint. His hands are scarred, his back is destroyed. He pays taxes, enormous, crushing taxes, his entire working life. And the data from the American Enterprise Institute and Scandinavian fiscal studies confirm what he already knows in his bones. He will be a net contributor to the state from his first paycheck to his last breath, while the average woman will extract more in services and transfers than she ever pays in. Now imagine that same man sitting down at 2:47 a.m., not to write poetry about his feelings, but to eat cold leftovers before 6 hours of sleep and another day of keeping the electrical grid alive, and tell me with a straight face that the real epistemological crisis of our age is that his civilization failed to center a professor's night journal. Tell me that his sacrifice is less valid than her Moleskine. Tell me that the ore he hauls, the bridges he builds, the sewage systems he maintains, so that Etsy Shopify accounts can process hex your X candle transactions at 3 a.m. That all of this is merely the masculine economy of extraction, while a woman selling curse scrolls for $39.99 a month is the vanguard of a new civilization. You cannot tell me this, not with logic, not with evidence, not with the blood-soaked ledger of every man who died building the infrastructure that makes her literary tantrum physically possible. And yet this is precisely the claim advanced by the high priestesses of the post-rational, who have performed a metaphysical inversion so audacious it would make a medieval alchemist blush. They have declared that feelings are facts, and facts are feelings with privilege. This is not epistemology. This is solipsism dressed in academic robes, and it collapses the moment you subject it to the simplest test of formal logic. A statement that is true because the speaker felt it and which cannot be questioned without the questioner being accused of epistemic colonization is not a knowledge claim, it is a religious dogma. It is unfalsifiable by design. When someone says Ryan from accounting looked at me with patriarchal violence and insists this statement is true by virtue of her nervous system registering it, she has not described reality, she has demanded that reality kneel before her emotional weather system. This is the epistemology of a toddler who believes the room disappears when she closes her eyes, granted the apparatus of a university department. Consider what the writer actually confesses in those midnight pages. She sabotages every relationship on purpose. She tells men she hates them, then resents their pain. She tests her community's love by saying terrible things, then despises them for staying. She screams into pillows for 20 minutes because her mother told her to smile. She dreams of rooms with no doors and wakes exhausted, then insists this exhaustion is not her own psyche eating itself alive, but rather the result of a 10,000-year patriarchal conspiracy. Now, I want you to perform a simple thought experiment. Strip every mention of patriarchy and systemic violence from those journal entries and read them cold. What you have is a clinical portrait of emotional incontinence, self-sabotage, identity instability, projective blame shifting, and a complete inability to tolerate either intimacy or solitude. This is not spiritual warfare. This is a woman at war with her own refusal to grow up, projecting her inner chaos onto the nearest available man and calling it revolution. The Greeks had a word for the womb wandering through the body, causing madness. They were wrong about the anatomy. They were dead right about the diagnosis. The tragedy, the dark Swiftian comedy of it all, is that this confession of dysfunction is now monetized. The Hexbox subscription service, the vulva mugs, the crocheted uteri with removable fibroids, this is not a counter-economy. This is the commodification of mental illness, subsidized by the very masculine infrastructure its sellers claim to be dismantling. Shopify runs on servers housed in buildings built by men, powered by grids maintained by men, protected by legal codes drafted by men, in a civilization defended by men who die at rates her gender studies syllabus refuses to acknowledge. She sells rage rituals for $39.99, while the actual net transfer asymmetry, men paying in, women drawing out, funds the welfare state that makes her Etsy shop financially viable. She is not a revolutionary. She is a parasite who has convinced herself the host is the enemy, and the host, gentleman, has been trained since birth to feel guilty for bleeding. What I intend to demonstrate in the following pages is that this is not merely a bad essay by an unhappy woman. It is the symptom of a civilizational immune system that has been systematically reprogrammed to treat its own antibodies as pathogens. The displacement of excellence with equity, the replacement of due process with accusation, the recoding of competence as masculine violence, these are not bugs, they are the explicit program. Every metric we have, from family courts that eject fathers while enslaving them financially, to a sentencing gap between men and women 6 times larger than the racial gap, to 93% of workplace deaths being male, to suicide rates 3 to 4 times higher for men in every developed nation, tells the same story from a different angle. The civilization that built the aqueduct, the parliament, the laboratory, and the common law is being dismantled by people who believe vibes are an organizational principle and that a 45 journal made from recycled feminist theory textbooks constitutes resistance. I will prove, using the formal tools of logic, the empirical record of biology and economics, and the accumulated wisdom of the Western canon, that what calls itself liberation here is a death cult, that what calls itself community is a crabs-in-bucket pathology of mutual destruction, and that the only cure for the poison of solipsistic psychosis is the bitter, clarifying medicine of objective truth, taken straight, no chaser, administered without apology to anyone furious enough to finally swallow it. Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. The Soft Revolution, Why My Night Journal is More Valid Than Your Entire Civilization, by Dr.
Winona, feminist Marxist, PH professor of gender studies, High Coven member she, they last Tuesday at approximately 2 to 47 a.m.
My night journal revealed something the entire patriarchal epistemological framework has spent millennia trying to bury. My feelings are facts, and your facts are just feelings with privilege. I had been writing no channeling in my moleskin, ethically sourced naturally, when the words poured out like menstrual blood the Supreme Court tries to legislate away. The reason men fear our journaling is that written language was always meant to be a womb, not a weapon. They turned it into a sword. We're turning it back into a sanctuary. I wept, then I cackled. Then I ordered 3 more crystals from an Etsy seller in Sedona who gets it. The night journal as radical epistemology. Men have logos, we have Erlebnis. And before you reach for your Wikipedia definition of lived experience, like some kind of epistemic colonizer, let me stop you. What I'm describing cannot be captured by your frameworks because your frameworks are the cage. My night journal doesn't describe reality, it enacts it. When I write Ryan from accounting looked at me with patriarchal violence today, I am not making a claim subject to your bourgeois standards of evidence. I am performing a speech act that restructures the power dynamics of the entire room. The entry becomes true because I felt it. My nervous system is a seismograph for oppression that your linear logic cannot access. This isn't irrational, it's post-rational. The night journal is where we go when the world refuses to hear us. It's where I discovered that my last 3 relationships weren't failed romances, but sites of structural violence masquerading as intimacy. Where I realized that communication is just a word men use to demand we make ourselves legible to their gaze while they remain opaque fortresses of unexamined privilege. A woman's journal is an uncolonized territory. It is the last frontier they haven't penetrated with their need to categorize, systematize, and control. And they hate this. They call it crazy. They call it hysterical. They whisper borderline like a diagnosis when it's actually a prophetic vision of a world that has made us sick by refusing to see us whole. I've kept a night journal since I was 14. That's 23 years of unremitting testimony. 23 years of documenting the slow violence of a civilization that fears the feminine so deeply it built entire religions to burn it out of us. We kept writing anyway, community building as warfare, the good kind. Last month, my collective, the Woven Web Coven for Intersectional Prosperity, held our monthly community building circle in the back of a feminist-owned coffee shop that doubles as a Reiki healing center on weekends. We were 17 women, 2 non-binary folks, and 1 very quiet male ally who understood that his role was to listen, nod, and Venmo us 40 each for emotional labor compensation. He did, without being asked twice, because he's evolving. The topic was, how do we build communities that don't replicate masculine violence? What emerged was revelation, not discussion, revelation. The kind that descends when women stop performing coherence for male approval and start speaking from the place before language, before logic, before the patriarchal severing of knowing from feeling. Sierra, who is a doula and moon phase life coach, said, "Every time I try to organize something, some man asks about structure and accountability. Like, sir, my community is built on vibes." Your need for organizational charts is literally a trauma response. We all felt that in our bodies. Several of us cried. One person screamed into a pillow we keep specifically for this purpose. Our male ally looked mildly alarmed but said nothing, which was correct. Here's what men will never understand about community. It is not built on agreements or constitutions or any of their beloved social contracts. Read documents of control. It is built on mutual resonance, on the unspoken knowing that passes between women who have survived the same storms. When we build community, we are not creating alternative institutions. We are dismantling the very concept of institution from the inside out. Every potluck that operates without a formal hierarchy is a small apocalypse for the patriarchal order. Every group chat where decisions emerge organically through feeling rather than voting is a revolution. Most men are too literal to perceive. This terrifies them. They should be terrified. Thrang, the Itzy economy, crafting our way out of capitalism, sort of. She makes 4,000, 7,000 a year. Now a man, a certain kind of man, would look at those numbers and sneer. He would say something about real jobs and market value and contributing to the economy. He would point to GDP charts and productivity metrics and all those lovely little numbers that pretend to measure human worth while systematically undervaluing everything women have ever done. But here's what he misses. Morgana's candle business isn't just commerce. It's consciousness raising with a Shopify account. Every candle she sells is a tiny act of rebellion against the domestication of female rage. Every cursed scroll is a reclamation of the linguistic power the church burned out of midwives and healers. Every 5-star review that says this candle helped me finally process my divorce is proof that the personal remains definitively, irreversibly political. The Etsy economy is not a subset of capitalism. It is a counter-economy operating within capitalism's ruins. It is women, non-binary people, and marginalized folk building parallel structures of exchange that privilege intention over efficiency, healing over output, and connection over profit. And yes, we still use money. We still participate in the system. That's called surviving under late capitalism while refusing its values. And if you can't hold that contradiction, That's a you problem. I have purchased the following from Etsy in the last month alone. A vulva-adorned mug that says Feminist Furry in gold lettering 28, a hand-bound journal made from recycled feminist theory textbooks 45, a Smash the Patriarchy embroidery kit 22-3 resting witch face. Enamel pins 12 each, a custom tarot deck featuring only women and non-binary figures 65, a crotcheted uterus with removable fibroids, gift for a friend 35, total 241. Is this economic activity? Technically. But it's also ritual. It's also spell work. Every dollar I spend on a woman's craft is a dollar redirected from the masculine economy of extraction and exploitation. Every purchase is a small hex against the corporate order. The women on Etsy are not entrepreneurs. They are priestesses of the new economy, and their shops are altars. Illogical, sadomasochism, and the feminine conviction, or why I'm tired and it's your fault. Now we must go deeper into the wound, into the place where the personal and political fuse into something that burns. Every woman I know, including myself, carries a particular kind of exhaustion that cannot be explained by sleep debt or workload. It is a spiritual exhaustion. A tiredness that lives in the bones and the blood and the ancestral memory of every woman who was ever told she was too much or not enough in the same breath. This exhaustion has a source, the psychological sadomasochism of existing under patriarchy. Here is how it works. The setup, patriarchy, tells women we are inherently nurturing, empathetic, self-sacrificing. It frames these as virtues. The twist, it then punishes us for displaying these exact qualities by calling us doormats, codependent, or lacking boundaries. The double twist, it then pathologizes our rage at this double bind as borderline personality disorder or histrionic or unstable. The checkmate, it offers us self-help and therapy and wellness culture, all industries predominantly controlled by checks notes, the same system that made us sick. This is sadomasochism at civilizational scale. And the most insidious part is that it has colonized our own psyches. We have internalized the patriarch's whip. We flagellate ourselves for not being strong enough while simultaneously being punished for being too strong. My night journal from the past 6 months documents this cycle with devastating clarity. March 14, I'm so tired of being strong. Why can't I just be soft without being called weak? April 3, told Mark I needed space. He said I was pushing him away, so I stayed. Now I hate myself. May 19, therapist says I have anxious attachment. Translation, I have normal human needs in a society that pathologizes feminine longing. June 30th, my mother called. She said I should smile more and find a nice man. I screamed into a pillow for 20 minutes. The pillow is now in the garbage. Some things cannot be cleansed. July 15th, dreamt I was in a room with no doors. Every wall was a mirror. Every reflection showed a different version of me, all of them crying. I woke up exhausted. The exhaustion is the point. This is not mental illness. This is spiritual warfare, and the battlefield is our own nervous systems. The workforce, your meritocracy, is a lie and always was. Now let us discuss the so-called workforce, that grand theater of masculine self-congratulation where men in suits perform elaborate rituals of mutual validation while pretending their success has anything to do with merit. I hold a PhD. I am a professor. I have published 17 papers in peer-reviewed journals that none of you have read because you're too busy citing men who said the same things less well 50 years ago. And yet, somehow, I am expected to justify my existence in academia every single day, while my male colleague who teaches one class on the philosophy of sports is considered a towering intellectual. The modern workforce was designed by men, for men to reward masculine modes of being it values. Competition over collaboration, hierarchy over horizontal organizing, rationality over emotional intelligence, individual achievement over collective care, presence over absence, how variablist assertiveness over responsiveness, linear thinking over web thinking, notice anything. These are not neutral values. They are gendered values masquerading as professional standards. And when women enter this workforce and say perhaps we should restructure this meeting to allow for more vulnerable sharing, we are called unprofessional. when we suggest that perhaps the reason there aren't more women in leadership isn't because we lack confidence, but because the entire definition of leadership is masculine coded. We are called complainers. When we propose that maybe the standards themselves are the problem, we are told we want to lower the bar. What you call excellence is simply the set of qualities that men have historically valued and then declared universal. What you call merit is simply masculine privilege, wearing a lab coat and carrying a clipboard. The displacement of excellence with equity is not a bug, it is a feature. It is the only path to justice. When we demand that 50% of all positions be held by women, we are not asking for special treatment. We are demanding the minimum threshold of human decency. Anything less than proportional representation is violence. And when men whine about qualified candidates and objective standards, what they're really saying is, I'm afraid of competing in a system I didn't design. Good, you should be afraid your time is ending. Warreem P.S. Illogical sadomasochisms in intimate relationships, a case study in truth. August 22, 2:13 a.m. I think I sabotage every relationship on purpose. Not because I'm broken, but because intimacy under patriarchy is inherently unsafe. Every time a man says I love you, I hear I possess you. Every time he says I'm here for you, I hear I'm here to control you. Is this paranoia or is it pattern recognition? My therapist says I should challenge these thoughts. But what if the thoughts are right? What if the real mental illness is trusting men in the first place? August 22, 3:47 a.m. I just reread that entry and I want to burn this journal. Not because it's wrong, but because it's too right. The knowing is unbearable. The knowing is the wound. I'd rather be crazy than see clearly. At least crazy has company. Clarity is so alone. August 22, 4:02 a.m. I texted Mark. I said, I hate you. He didn't respond for 6 hours. When he did, he said that hurt my feelings. His feelings. I tell him I hate him, and somehow his feelings are the issue. This is the entire problem with men. They make everything about them, even our pain, especially our pain. This is psychological sadomasochism in action. The cycle of needing connection, fearing connection, destroying connection, and then blaming the destruction on the very person I was trying to connect with. And this is crucial, this is not my pathology. This is the pathology of a world that has made genuine feminine intimacy impossible. A world where women have been so thoroughly gaslit about our own needs that we can no longer distinguish between love and domination. My journal doesn't lie. It can't lie. It is the purest expression of my unreconstructed feminine truth. And if that truth makes you uncomfortable, good. Your discomfort is the sound of privilege losing its grip. Community as cure, community as curse. I returned to my collective the week after my August journal spiral. I told them everything. The texts, the hatred, the 4 hours of sleep, the wanting to burn my own words. They held me, literally. 3 women physically surrounded me while I sobbed. Another burned sage. Our male ally sat quietly in the corner and typed notes on his phone, which we later decided was supportive witnessing and not creepy documentation, because we voted on it and the vote was unanimous except for him, who abstained appropriately. This is community. This is what men will never have because their pride won't let them admit they need it. But here's the darker truth I wrote about later that night. September 3rd, 1:58 a.m., the collective loves me. I know this, but sometimes I hate them for loving me because their love feels like obligation. And sometimes I test their love by saying terrible things just to see if they'll stay. And they do stay. And I hate them more for staying because now I owe them. Now I'm trapped in their goodness. Their goodness is a cage. Everything is a cage. The only freedom is the journal. The only freedom is the page. This is the feminine condition in its rawest form. We need community so desperately that we destroy it the moment we find it. Not because we're broken, but because wholeness was never offered to us. We were given fragments and told to build cathedrals. And when the cathedrals inevitably collapse, we blame ourselves, or we blame each other, or we blame men. And we're usually right to blame men. Let's be honest. The ITA-industrial complex and the future of feminist economics. Morgana's candle business has expanded. She now offers a monthly subscription box, the Hex Box. For $39.99 per month, subscribers receive a themed curse candle, a feminist, zine, a playlist of rage music curated by Ma, a ritual guide for channeling anger into productive hexing, a small gift from a marginalized Etsy seller she amplifies. Each month she has 400 subscribers. You do the math. Actually don't. Math is a tool of patriarchal quantification, and her business's value cannot be captured by arithmetic. The point is not the money. The point is the network. The Hexbox is not commerce. It is consciousness raising disguised as consumerism. Every box that arrives in a subscriber's mailbox is a tiny bomb thrown at the walls of patriarchal reality. And the community that has formed around it, the Hexbox Facebook group, has 2,300 members who share their hexing experiences, their rage rituals, their night journal excerpts. It is a digital coven. It is the future. This is what terrifies the right-wing commentators. Not that women are angry. We've always been angry, but that we are organizing our anger, that we are building economic structures that fund our rage, that we are creating parallel institutions that don't need male approval to function. They call us divisive. We call ourselves liberated, toward a feminine epistemology of the impossible. I want to close with another journal entry, the most recent one written last night in the hours between when the world sleeps and when the truth wakes up. October 15, 3:33 a.m. I have been thinking about the word hysterical. It comes from the Greek word for uterus. The Greeks thought the womb wandered through the body, causing madness. They were wrong about the mechanism, but right about the diagnosis. The womb does wander. It wanders through history, through language, through every institution men built to contain it, and it will not be contained. Not by medicine, not by law, not by religion, not by the soft chains of wellness and self-care that modernity offers as pacifiers. The womb is revolutionary by nature. It creates life without asking permission. It bleeds without apology. It harbors a darkness that men have spent millennia trying to exorcise with their floodlights of reason and science and objective truth. But the darkness remains. The darkness is patient. The darkness is not empty. It is full of everything they tried to bury. They call us witches. Fine, we are witches. They call us hysterical. Fine, we are hysterical. They call us destroyers of civilization. Fine, we are destroyers of civilization. Because their civilization was never ours, and what was never ours was never worth saving. I closed the journal. I placed it on my altar next to the obsidian egg and the photo of my grandmother, who survived 3 marriages and left behind nothing but a recipe for bread and a reputation for being difficult. I am her heir. We are all her heirs, and the night belongs to us. Dr.
Winona feminist Marxist PhD is Professor of Gender Studies at the University of the Unbroken Web, a High Coven member, and the author of 17 books you should already be reading.
Her latest, The Journal as Hex, Writing Your Way Out of Patriarchal Reality, is available wherever books that threaten the established order are sold. She lives alone by choice and is not accepting male students at this time. Her cat, Valerie Solanas II, is fine. Follow her on all platforms, Genocentric Truth, where she posts night journal excerpts at 3 a.m. Because that is when the veil is thinnest. If this piece activated you, good. Your activation is the point. Your discomfort is the work. Venmo donations for emotional labor accepted and encouraged. Not all women. Yes, all patriarchy. Night journal truths. Hex the system. Etsy, which economy community is revolution. Feminist fury. Disrupt everything. The tyranny of the tear-stained moleskin, how solipsistic psychosis replaced empirical reality. Picture a man before a judge, facing charges for a crime he never committed, with his sole defense being, "Your Honor, my emotions are objective reality, and your objective reality is merely emotion with social advantage." How many seconds before the bailiff leads him to a cell? 3? 5? Yet our distinguished gender studies professor publishes exactly this argument, not as mockery, but as epistemology, and the university provides her income rather than directing her to psychological care. The ancient Greeks described a condition where the womb traveled through the body, causing mental disturbance, hysteria. They were incorrect about the anatomy. They were correct about the condition. What Dr.
Winona labels post-rationality is merely pre-rationality wearing second-hand clothes and performing interpretive movements at the edge of the void. Her late-night diary entries are not prophetic insights.
They offer glimpses into a mind that has never subjected its own output to verification, and like any factory without quality control, the resulting product is faulty. Consider her own evidence. She writes, "I think I sabotage every relationship on purpose." Then she texts Mark, "I hate you." Then when he responds that his feelings were hurt, she records in her journal that his feelings are the problem. This is not a critique of patriarchy. This is a clinical presentation of emotional incontinence so severe that it would make a second-year psychiatry resident drop their coffee. The classical tradition which built the civilization she lampoons from her taxpayer-funded office understood that the unexamined passions are tyranny. Temperance was not repression. Temperance was the prerequisite for any claim to adulthood. A woman who screams, "I hate you" at 3 a.m. and then blames the recipient for having feelings is not subverting power structures. She is a toddler with a thesaurus. Her psychological sadomasochism is not systemic oppression. It is the entirely predictable result of a mind that has refused for 23 years of journaling to apply a single critical standard to its own output. The journal does not lie, she says. Of course it lies. That is what unexamined subjectivity does. It lies beautifully, convincingly, and above all, comfortably, because the one question the night journal never asks is, what if I am wrong? And here we arrive at the grotesque contradiction at the center of this entire performance. She deploys the language of clinical psychology, attachment theory, trauma response, nervous system regulation, like a teenager who has memorized the DSM between shifts at Hot Topic. She diagnoses civilization. With sadomasochism, she pathologizes Mark. She identifies anxious attachment in herself and then immediately reframes it as political resistance. But the moment an actual diagnostic framework, borderline personality disorder, which matches her self-described behavioral loops with the precision of a fingerprint, is suggested, she shrieks that this is pathologizing feminine longing. No, BPD is not a commentary on femininity. BPD is a clinical description of a pattern, frantic efforts to avoid abandonment, unstable interpersonal relationships, identity disturbance, emotional volatility, chronic feelings of emptiness, and inappropriate intense anger. Read her own journal entries. She has handed us the intake paperwork and billed us for the privilege. She wants the vocabulary of psychology without the accountability of psychology, the authority of diagnosis without the burden of being diagnosed. This is not scholarship. This is a child demanding the car keys while insisting the rules of the road do not apply to her emotional state. The entire apparatus of her argument depends on a hidden premise she never examines because examining it would collapse the whole structure, that society defaults to disbelieving women. The empirical evidence points in precisely the opposite direction. The women are wonderful effect, documented across decades of implicit association test data by Eagley and Mladinek, demonstrates that both men and women associate female-coded stimuli with positive valence at rates far exceeding chance. Society does not default to disbelieving women. Society defaults to protecting women, to extending credit to their claims, to treating their distress as inherently legible and morally urgent. When she weeps at the back of a Reiki coffee shop, 3 women surround her. A man sits silently in the corner, performing supportive compliance, and she still records this as evidence of oppression. What she is experiencing is not systemic disbelief. She is experiencing the rare and disorienting sensation of someone somewhere not immediately rearranging reality to accommodate her latest emotional spasm. The empathy gap she decries is the gap between the limitless sympathy she believes she is owed and the merely abundant sympathy she actually receives. Men, by contrast, experience an empathy gap that is measured in body bags. 93% of workplace fatalities are male. 3 to 4 times as many men kill themselves as women. Male suffering is not individualized and pathologized. Male suffering is simply invisible because nobody's night journal fills with tears over the construction worker who fell 40 feet so a gender studies professor could lecture his sons about toxic masculinity in a building his taxes funded. Which brings us to the epistemological crime at the heart of this manifesto. She writes, "My nervous system is a seismograph for oppression that your linear logic cannot access." Let us translate this claim into plain language. I have a feeling. The feeling is evidence. You cannot examine the evidence. If you ask to examine the evidence, you are committing violence against me. In the entire history of human thought, from the pre-Socratics through the scholastics to the modern scientific method, no framework has ever been accepted as knowledge that cannot be tested, challenged, or falsified. This is not patriarchy. This is the minimum condition for distinguishing knowledge from delusion. When she declares that her night journal enacts reality rather than describing it, that her speech acts restructure power dynamics by the mere fact of her feeling, she is not advancing a new epistemology. She is founding a religion, and like all religions, it demands faith, punishes heresy, and considers doubt the greatest sin. Her reference to epistemic colonization is not an argument, it is a shutting down of argument. It is a velvet rope stretched across the entrance to reason with a bouncer who checks your politics at the door. The Moleskine itself deserves our pity. That ethically sourced notebook has spent 23 years absorbing the projections of a mind that refuses to build an interior. The ancients understood that the examined life requires an examiner, a faculty of self-observation that stands apart from the passions and judges them. She has no such faculty. She has an echo chamber bound in recycled feminist theory textbooks. When she writes, "I'd rather be crazy than see clearly," at least crazy has company. She is describing with unintentional precision the terror of the void. She has no stable self, no interior witness, no capacity to say, "I was wrong," without immediately adding, "but the system made me do it." The journal is not a sanctuary. It is a hall of mirrors where every reflection agrees with her, and no voice ever asks the one question that would save her. What if the problem is not Mark, not the patriarchy, not the workforce, not the Greeks, not the Supreme Court, not the linear thinkers, not the epistemic colonizers, not the DSM, not your mother, not the pillow you screamed into, not the crystals from Sedona, not the obsidian egg on your altar, but you? That question never appears in the night journal, because the night journal is the place where that question goes to die. Her relationship with Mark is a case study in projection so textbook, it could be used to train therapists. She tells him she hates him. He says his feelings are hurt. She records this as evidence that men make everything about themselves. She told a man she hated him, and his response was the problem. This is not pattern recognition. This is a woman who has disowned her own inner critic so completely that she must locate it outside herself, in the nearest male body, and then punish that body for harboring the judgment she refuses to carry. The psychological tradition she selectively cites has a name for this: projection. The ancients had a different vocabulary. They spoke of the need to master the passions before the passions master you. She has not mastered her passions. Her passions have mastered her, built a throne in her skull, and are currently dictating feminist theory to a captive group of 17 women and one compliant Venmo-drained male. She destroys connection, admits she destroys connection, and then explains that the destruction is proof she was right to destroy it. This is not a dialectical argument. This is a snake eating its own tail and demanding you applaud the nutritional substance. And finally, the unfalsifiable shield. My truth is true because I felt it. Your demand for evidence is violence. The frameworks that might disprove my claim are the very instruments of my oppression. This is not post-rational. This is anti-rational. A theory that cannot be disproven is not a theory. It is a dogma wrapped in academic jargon and seasoned with Etsy crystals. When she writes that her journal cannot lie because it is the purest expression of her unreconstructed feminine truth, she is making a theological claim, not an epistemological one. She is asserting papal infallibility for her own emotional life and excommunicating anyone who requests so much as a footnote. The tragedy is not that she believes this. The tragedy is that universities, HR departments, family courts, and social media platforms have begun structuring policy around precisely this logic. That accusation is evidence, that feeling is fact, that the demand for due process is itself a form of abuse. Men are losing their children, their incomes, their reputations, and in the worst cases, their lives on the basis of frameworks indistinguishable from the one outlined in that molluscan. Some 300,000 paternity tests are conducted annually in the United States, and between 10 and 30% exclude the putative father. Men pay child support to children who are not theirs, to women who lied, in courts that apply a best interests of the child standard that functions as a license for maternal unilateralism. 80% of suicides are male. Family courts operate on a balance of probabilities standard that would be laughed out of any criminal courtroom, but is considered sufficient to separate a father from his children and indenture his future earnings. This is the world her post-rational epistemology has built. It is not theoretical. It is not a journal entry. It is the lived experience of millions of men whose suffering is rendered invisible by the very empathy gap she insists does not exist in the wrong direction. The night journal is not a threat to power. The night journal is power, exercising itself through tears, through accusations, through the simple and devastating mechanism of demanding that reality rewrite itself around the emotional state of a woman who has never once been asked to grow up. This is not merely absurd. It is parasitism dressed in ethically sourced linen. The modern witch economy depends entirely on the very system it claims to oppose, clinging to masculine infrastructure like ivy on a load-bearing wall, convinced it is the wall. The hex box and its associated paraphernalia represent something far darker than mere grift. They reveal the logical terminus of standpoint epistemology, an unfalsifiable cult where the only sacrament is complaint. The only tithe is subscription, and the only commandment is that the external world must perpetually restructure itself around the chaotic interiority of the unwilling. The parasitism of the hex box, how the ersatz economy of resentment starves on the civilization it hates. A $47,000 annual income derived from selling curse candles to the emotionally deranged is not an economy, it is a parasite feeding on the open sores of a dying culture. I want you to pause and perform a simple thought experiment that would make any scholastic philosopher proud. What would happen to Morgana's Etsy empire if the men who mine the soy for her candles, who forge the obsidian for her crystals, who lay the fiber optic cables sustaining her Shopify store, and who maintain the electrical grids powering her iPhone simply stopped? Her entire counter-economy vanishes within a fortnight, revealing it for what it truly is, a luxury belief system subsidized entirely by the masculine labor she claims to be hexing. The hex box is not consciousness raising with a Shopify account. It is the industrial-scale monetization of female instability. Every month, 400 women pay $40 to receive a themed curse candle and a rage ritual guide, rather than confronting the uncomfortable reality that their misery stems from their own choices, their own pathologies, and their own refusal to develop interiority. This is not commerce in any dignified sense. It is the financial exploitation of spiritual sickness, a wealth transfer from the confused to the cynical, predicated on the demonstrably false premise that a black soy candle and an obsidian pebble will resolve the existential void left by abandoning husband, home, and hearth. Consider what the trivium demands of any coherent mind. First grammar, the gathering of facts. Then logic, the testing of those facts against contradiction. Finally rhetoric, the persuasive articulation of truth. Now contrast this 1,200-year-old engine of civilizational competence with a Portland doula, declaring that organizational charts are a trauma response and that community should be built on vibes. A vibe does not purify water. A vibe does not adjudicate a property dispute. A vibe does not maintain the supply chains that deliver ethically sourced Moleskine notebooks to the doorstep of a gender studies professor at 2 a.m. What this doula calls masculine violence is in fact the teleological discipline necessary to prevent a society of 330 million souls from disintegrating into tribal warfare. And history proves this with monotonous regularity. The Roman Republic endured for 5 centuries because it operated on a mixed constitution, monarchical energy in the consuls, aristocratic wisdom in the Senate, democratic voice in the assemblies. Each branch checked the others through formal, codified, and enforceable structures, not through mutual resonance or unspoken knowing. When that constitutional order collapsed, Rome did not descend into a vibey communal potluck. It descended into civil war, proscription lists, and the sound of Republican throats being cut in the forum. The founders of every stable civilization understood what our Etsy witches refused to grasp. Feelings are not structures, and resonance is not law. The breathtaking hypocrisy of this entire essay lies in one devastating contradiction that the writer is too solipsistic to perceive. She claims to be dismantling the concept of the institution and burning down the corporate order. Yet she is entirely helplessly and hopelessly dependent upon masculine-created platforms to distribute her wares. Etsy was founded by 3 men. Shopify was built by a German-Canadian male engineer. Facebook was architected by a Harvard dropout with a chip on his shoulder and a disdain for the very community standards she now invokes. Venmo, that magnificent instrument of emotional labor compensation, was created by 2 American men who understood digital finance better than any gender studies collective ever will. The internet itself, that glorious vehicle of feminine spiral sharing, was forged by the United States Department of Defense, an institution composed overwhelmingly of men willing to die in service of the very nation this essayist declares was never ours and never worth saving. She is not a revolutionary. She is a spoiled consumer LARPing as a subversive, while safely insulated by the very system she claims to be hexing. It is the civilizational equivalent of a toddler screaming, "I hate you" at her father, while eating the groceries he purchased in the house he built, heated by the furnace he maintains, and protected by the locks he installed. Let us now confront the mathematical reality that shatters this entire house of cards. Across every Western democracy, men are the net lifetime contributors to the public purse, and women are the net lifetime recipients. In the United Kingdom, a man will pay approximately $604,000 more in taxes than he receives in public services over his lifetime. A woman will receive approximately $708,000 more than she contributes. Scandinavian data reveals the same pattern, with men functioning as net fiscal contributors and women as net fiscal recipients across every cohort study. This is not opinion, this is arithmetic, the very discipline the writer dismisses as a tool of patriarchal quantification when it fails to flatter her narrative. Meanwhile, 93% of workplace fatalities are male. 14 of the 15 leading causes of death disproportionately kill men. Men die on average 4 to 5 years earlier than women, yet funding for male-specific health research remains a fraction of its female equivalent. The masculine economy of extraction and exploitation that the writer so casually condemns is the economy that built the roads her Etsy packages travel on, the power grid that charges her iPhone, the surgical suite where her future knee replacement will be performed by a surgeon who trained for 14 years in a meritocratic hierarchy she now wants dismantled, and the police force she would call in an instant if a real burglar, rather than her imagined one, ever entered her apartment. Without the masculine economy, her Shopify account, her ethically sourced Moleskine, and her local Reiki center cease to exist within 48 hours, and she is left alone in the dark without a cursed candle to light. This writer declares that there is no bar, and that the bar is a social construct designed to exclude. Let us test this proposition against the physical world, that stubborn reality which refuses to bend to the dictates of post-structuralist theory. A bridge does not care about the gender of its engineer. Gravity does not accommodate itself to the web thinking of a Portland doula. A tumor does not pause its metastasis to inquire whether the oncologist treating it passed her exams through merit or through diversity mandate. The objective standards she despises, linear thinking, rationality, hierarchy, competition, are the only mechanisms that prevent bridges from collapsing, planes from falling from the sky, and electrical grids from failing during a February freeze. When she demands these standards be dismantled to accommodate her preferred mode of vulnerable sharing, she is not requesting inclusion. She is demanding that reality itself be restructured to spare her the indignity of having to become competent. The historical record is unambiguous. Every institution captured by this logic, education, human resources, social work, family courts, sees its primary function shift from excellence to grievance, from output to complaint, from building to dismantling. The result is not liberation. It is the slow, grinding paralysis of every function upon which civilized life depends. When the writer declares herself a destroyer of civilization and boasts of her witchcraft, her hexes, and her embrace of the darkness, I believe her. This is not quirky, it is not empowering, and it is surely not a personality. It is a complete metaphysical rebellion against the natural order, reason and the transcendent, and it should be taken at its word. For millennia, the great traditions of the West understood that the cultivation of virtue, prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude required the subordination of appetite to reason, of pathos to logos. She has inverted this entirely. Her appetite is her truth, her emotion is her evidence, and her rage is her sacrament. By her own admission, she writes at 3 a.m, steeped in hatred, channeling a darkness she believes is full of everything they tried to bury. This is not psychology, it is demonology. She describes a cycle of sabotaging intimacy, fearing connection, destroying connection, and blaming the destruction on the very person she was trying to connect with, and then declares this cycle not my pathology but the pathology of the world. This is the precise mechanism by which the unexamined life becomes the unaccountable life. She has constructed an epistemological fortress in which her feelings are unfalsifiable, her accusations are unanswerable, and her behavior is always someone else's fault. This is not liberation, it is the prison of the self without interiority, endlessly projecting its own void onto the nearest available man. And then there's the male ally, that tragic creature, sitting quietly in the corner, abstaining from votes, typing notes on his phone, and handing over $40 via Venmo for the privilege of being permitted to breathe the same air as 17 women and 2 non-binary individuals who consider his very presence a form of patriarchal violence. I want to speak directly to this man because he is the intended reader of this book, and he is currently drowning. You were told that your masculinity was toxic, that your rationality was oppression, that your instinct to build and protect was somehow a trauma response. You internalized this poison because you are fundamentally good-hearted and wanted to do the right thing. But look at where it has landed you, sitting in a Reiki center, paying an emotional tithe, watching women who claim to hate hierarchy enforce the most rigid hierarchy imaginable. One where your status is permanently fixed at the bottom, your voice is permanently set to mute, and your wallet is permanently set to extract. You are not an ally, you are an ATM with a pulse. You have been utilitized, stripped of your dignity, your voice, and your logos. And you have consented to your own disposability because the culture told you that resistance would prove you were the very monster they always suspected you were. I am telling you now, with the full weight of every tradition that ever built anything worth preserving, resistance is not monstrosity. Resistance is the first act of reclaiming your humanity. The boy who called out the emperor's new clothes was not cruel. He was simply honest, and the emperor was simply naked. The empress in this story is naked too. Her boutique hexes are nonsense, her night journal is a symptom, and her civilization-destroying rage is the roar of a void that refuses to look in the mirror. You have been lied to systematically and with surgical malice by an ideology that dresses its hatred in the language of compassion. Let me state the thesis with the clarity of a sledgehammer striking glass, the civilization that allows Dr.
Winona to scrawl her midnight grievances in an ethically sourced notebook was built, defended, paid for, and maintained by the very men she declares her enemies. This is not opinion, this is arithmetic.
Men contribute approximately 10,000 more in net taxes over a lifetime than they receive in state benefits. Women draw approximately 10,000 more than they contribute. The Scandinavian data confirms what any honest accountant already knows. The entire apparatus of welfare, therapy culture, academia, social services, and the family court industry is funded by male labor and male sacrifice. The hexbox economy generates $40,000 a year, selling candles to the angry. The masculine economy generates the electricity, the internet infrastructure, the shipping, logistics, the legal frameworks of commerce, and the police protection that allows those candles to arrive at the doorsteps of the deluded without the delivery driver being stabbed on the way. Remove men from the equation for 72 hours and the moleskin supply chain collapses, the Etsy servers go dark, the Reiki center loses power, and the civilization of feelings reveals itself for what it has always been. A parasite riding the spine of masculine competence and calling the spine oppressive. Consider what we have allowed to happen in the name of this bogus compassion. We have permitted the legal abolition of due process in family courts, where a man's assets can be seized, his children kidnapped by the state, and his reputation destroyed on the basis of an unverified accusation. Adjudicated in secret, with no jury, no cross-examination, and no standard of proof beyond the hysterical conviction of a woman who has been taught by every institution in the culture that her feelings constitute evidence. This is the Birkenhead Protocol made manifest, the reasonable man's standard replaced by the hysterical woman's standard, the courtroom converted into a ceremonial space for the validation of animus possession. Men comprise 76% of suicide victims, and divorced fathers are astronomically overrepresented in that grim statistic. Male suicide is 3 to 4 times more common than female suicide, yet receives a fraction of the research funding and institutional attention. Because the empathy gap is not a metaphor, but a measurable phenomenon. Female suffering is salient, male suffering is invisible, and this asymmetry is enforced by the very institutions that claim to serve equality. The system does what it does, and what it does is grind men into dust while billing them for the privilege. The ancient wisdom of the Western canon understood what modern ideology has worked tirelessly to obscure, that civilization requires the subordination of passion to reason, of chaos to order, of the fleeting whim to the enduring principle. The classical architects of natural law recognized that the logos is not a weapon of oppression, but the very instrument by which human beings distinguish truth from falsehood, justice from tyranny,
and the good from the merely pleasant. What Dr. Winona calls post-rationality is pre-rationality dressed in academic robes. The infantile demand that reality conform to feeling rather than feeling conform to reality.
Every great civilizational achievement, from aqueducts to constitutions, from the scientific method to the concept of individual rights, emerged from the masculine discipline of testing claims against evidence, submitting hypotheses to falsification, and building structures that endure precisely because they were not designed around anyone's emotional comfort. The traditions of the trivium, of dialectic, of due process, of mixed constitution, of subsidiarity, all share one foundational conviction that truth exists independently of the observer, that it can be apprehended through disciplined reason, and that the alternative is the tyranny of whoever shouts loudest or weeps most convincingly. You now possess what the system has worked tirelessly to deny you, the conceptual apparatus to see the machinery behind the curtain. You understand that gamma bias operates as a self-concealing filter, magnifying female suffering and minimizing male harm while disguising this asymmetry as compassion. You recognize that the empathy gap is not accidental, but structural, baked into every institution from the police to the family court to the therapy industry. You know that the Marxist feminist project to abolish the family, smash the patriarchy, and replace the husband with the state is not conspiracy theory, but documented legislative reality, traceable from the elimination of conjugal rights to the introduction of no-fault divorce to the expansion of welfare structures that incentivize fatherlessness. You grasp that the purpose of a system is what it does. And what this system does is transfer resources from men to women, authority from fathers to bureaucrats, and children from households to state custody, all while programming women to believe they are oppressed and men to believe they deserve it. This knowledge is not despair, it is liberation. The first and indispensable step to rebuilding a civilization is refusing to participate in the lies that destroyed it. The path forward is neither complex nor mysterious. It requires men to reclaim the logos that is their birthright, to refuse the shame that has been weaponized against them, to build fraternities of mutual support, to demand due process and equal protection under the law, to speak the truth without apology, and to withhold their labor, their attention, and their sacrifice from any system that rewards them with contempt. Every man who withdraws his consent from the gynocentric matrix weakens its foundation. Every man who speaks an unspeakable truth shatters a piece of the illusion. Every man who refuses to apologize for his nature, his competence, his authority, and his dignity strikes a blow against the entire architecture of lies. You have read this far because the truth recognizes itself, because the logos dwelling within you responds to the logos presented before you, because no amount of ideological conditioning can permanently extinguish the flame of reason in a mind that was made for truth. Now go and burn down the lies with it. And now the sponsored book introduction, Empiricism Under Siege: How Emotional Women and Beta Males Destroyed the Pursuit of Truth. If you have picked up this text expecting a gentle consolation, a moderated collection of polite conservative grievances, or a safe space to commiserate with fellow victims of the modern awakening, put it down immediately. Walk away. Return to your video games, your simulated bravado, or your sycophantic apologism for a gynocentric order that actively despises you. If you are a feminist, a cultural Marxist, or a weakling who still believes that appeasing emotional tyranny will eventually earn you a pat on the head, close this cover and retreat to the comfort of your HR-approved echo chamber. This text is not a hospital for the fragile. It is an armory for the relentless. You are holding a dialectical weapon, and like all high-voltage machinery, it is exceedingly dangerous to those who do not understand its operation. I am writing exclusively for the red-pilled, rational men who look around at the smoldering ruins of Western civilization and feel the volcanic, righteous fury of the architect watching his life's work dismantled by the utterly incompetent. My own awakening to the catastrophic betrayal of objective reality did not arrive through abstract philosophical musings, but through the brutal, frontline reality of watching institutions I once revered surrender to the hysterical shrieking of the collective. I spent years observing the systemic takeover of academic and corporate spaces, watching as the scientific method, forged by centuries of relentless male genius, was systematically dismantled to appease the hypersensitivity of privileged activists. I sat in sterile boardrooms where the cold, irrefutable data of empirical reality was tossed aside to accommodate the lived experiences of those who had never built a single thing in their lives. I watched as merit was executed on the altar of equity, as language was seized and perverted into a prison of compliance, and as the modern male was forced into a psychological double-bind so perverse that his very biological drive for logic was branded an oppressive threat. I realized with perfect clarity that the scaffolding of human progress, forged in the fires of masculine rationality, was being burned to the ground by a degenerate collective that claimed the buildings as their own, even as they threw the torches. We must begin by defining our terms, for the enemy has committed a grammatical seizure of our civilization. Empiricism is not a social construct. It is the objective verification of reality through observation and experience. Logos is the rational principle that governs the cosmos. Yet, the modern gynocentric order has successfully executed a satanic inversion of law, substituting the horizontal, fluid chaos of emotionalism for the vertical, transcendent hierarchy of truth. Consider the lethal contradiction of the feminist narrative. They curse the patriarchy, branding rationalism and empiricism as exclusionary tools of oppression, even as they blindly depend upon the smartphones, modern medicine, and indoor plumbing birthed exclusively by that very masculine rationalism. They feast on the technological miracles of the harvest while demonizing the men who engineered the plow. This is the chthonic helix of cultural Marxism, an epistemological evil driven by a dark triad convergence of narcissism, victimhood mongering, and a parasitic thirst for unearned power. Their primary weapon is empathy, bastardized into a soft totalitarianism that strangles objective inquiry in a velvet hug. Within these pages, you will find the dialectical shield necessary to break their double binds and permanently shatter their monopoly on victimhood. We are going to dissect the animus projective helix of feminist psychology diagnosing the pathology of resentment that animates their assault on logic. You will master the formal Aristotelian logic that decimates their unfalsifiable claims, learning to swiftly dismiss emotional extortion with the cold steel of empirical data. We will drag the hypocrisy of the female manipulation schema into the harsh light of biological essentialism, exposing the evolutionary strategies gone rogue that threaten the very foundations of civilization. This book will equip you with the irrefutable syllogisms needed to defend the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful as the ultimate masculine inheritance. If you are ready to weaponize your mind, obliterate the gynocentric narrative, and stand resolute in the reclamation of objective reality, read on. The architecture of reality is under siege, and it is time for the architects to take up the dialectical steel and rebuild. Empiricism Under Siege: How Emotional Women and Beta Males Destroyed the Pursuit of Truth, written by Conrad Reicher. Buy now, links in description.